Walter Greenleaf is a behavioral neuroscientist and medical technology developer here at Stanford. He's considered a leading authority on digital medicine and VR and has developed products in surgical simulation, 3D medical visualization, telerehabilitation, clinical informatics, clinical decision support, point of care.
Stop.
Everything. His academic research has been on age-related changes in cognition, mood, and behavior, but he's here today to talk to us about healthcare VR.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here for 4 reasons. I'll mention 2 of them right now, and the other 2 I think will be revealed in the context of my talk. It's wonderful to be here to see some old friends, the field I've been active in for the last 32 years. I've made some great friends along the way, and it's nice to see some of you here. You know who you are. It's also wonderful to make some new friends already, and I'm hoping through the context of this talk, I'll make even more friends. The other reason I'm very excited to be here is the field that I've been focused on, digital medicine, is really taking off now. I feel like continents are colliding. The medical device companies, the pharmaceutical companies are talking and working with the consumer electronics companies and the healthcare networks. So things are finally taking off in the area of digital medicine and the very powerful interventions that we have. So usually this talk takes about an hour. There's a large amount of material to go through because there's a lot going on in medical AR and VR. But I've decided to speed it up, and I'm going to skip every 3rd word. You guys are very good at pattern recognition and predictive modeling, so I'm sure it'll be okay. Okay, and I should mention that this does really feel to me like to be the era that medical VR is taking off. We have a conference next week at Harvard specific on medical VR, and we just started promoting and looking for speakers maybe 7 weeks ago. We have 90 speakers signed up, and we have several hundred people coming from all over the world. So this is a time for medical VR and AR. When I say VR, I really mean AR, mixed reality, VR. To me, it's just a spectrum of immersion. Now, before I go any further, how many of you have had a chance to try a virtual reality system? Wow, that's amazing. If I'd asked this question 2 years ago, probably 10% of the people in the room. Of those people who have tried VR, which looks like almost everybody, how many have tried a high-end system where it's hooked to a computer rather than just a phone-based system? Wow, that's just incredible. Well, then you know how powerful this technology can be to transport you and evoke emotions, and I'll talk about why that's important. So when I think about the things that we should all think about in terms of big problems in the world, there's political conflict, of course, global warming, pollution. I also worry a lot about the healthcare crisis and the aging population. If we look at the demographics, since the 60s, the US population has doubled, but we're very top-heavy. There's not enough caregivers to support the aging population. And when the boomers get up to their 80s and 90s, and 2 out of every 7 of us will have a neurodegenerative disease and other chronic diseases, it's going to be very expensive. And it's not just the US, really the rest of the world has a huge problem here. So in my opinion, the only solution is technology. We have to be robust in our development of interventions that support management of chronic disease, or else we're in a lot of trouble financially, socially. Everything will collapse unless we come up with big solutions now. The good news is there's a digital healthcare revolution going on that leverages mobile health and e-health, wearable sensors. It's patient-centered. No longer is the center of care the clinic. It's where the patient is. And it leverages everything that goes on in the internet, social, quantitative measurements, big data analytics, et cetera. Every medical device has been hooked up to the internet, including thermometers, sphygmometers, drug delivery devices. They're all going digital. And that combined with what's going on in the quantified self movements gives us a lot of power, especially when it comes to data analytics. We now have models where we can push and pull information to a patient, collect a big amount of data to do predictive modeling and data analytics, and provide very powerful interventions, with the point of care being where the patient is, leveraging cell phone and web-based technology. So what does this have to do with medical VR? Well, medical VR is one arm of that revolution. It's one way of intervening, but it's a very powerful way of intervening, and I'll give you some examples. This is a little bit washed out right here. But the point of this slide is, although Facebook through Oculus, Microsoft through the HoloLens, Samsung through its Gear system, HTC through the Vive platform, all the major, and Apple, all the major, and Google, all the major consumer electronics companies have put billions of dollars into developing AR and VR platforms. It's not going to be adequate to have entertainment and gaming sustain them. It's going to have to move over to the enterprise. And one of the biggest verticals, as you all know, is medicine. It's 20% of our economy right now. So this is going to happen. Now, why is it happening now? Well, previously, the technology was very uncomfortable. It was expensive. And also, the term virtual reality wasn't socialized enough. People thought it was a really weird term. I've been working in medical VR now for, I think it's 32 years. And one of the early discussions I had with some of my collaborators was what to call it. And we didn't have the term virtual reality. And I voted for simulated environment. And I'm so glad I lost that argument, because I think virtual reality now is a little bit more friendly and a little bit more descriptive than that boring term. But I was worried that in the medical community, the term virtual reality would be a little bit too glib. But by now, I think it's been socialized. VR and AR technology is affecting the whole stack of medical intervention, starting at health and wellness, better assessments, which we have to do, improved interventions, adherence to regimes, and distributed care delivery. And I'll give examples of all of these. But the full stack of clinical care is being affected by medical AR and VR technology. Now again, I started back in 1984 when I had more hair doing this. And back in those days, to do VR, we used a computer the size of a refrigerator, small refrigerator, and a head-mounted display that was sometimes so heavy we had to counterbalance it with a brick. And those head-mounted displays cost $70,000, and the computers cost $500,000. But we were able to do research. And the good news is people have been working in labs, understanding what works, what doesn't work, for decades. And so we know what pathways to go down. Now, granted, we have to revalidate those early pilot studies with today's technology, but we've made a lot of progress understanding where VR can be effective in the medical arena. There's a lot of publications out there on PubMed. Just search for virtual reality or simulated environment, perhaps, and a clinical disease, and you pull up. And a lot of the people right now who are working in this field, not this group, but the guys down the hall and the engineering students and the people out in Silicon Valley think VR just came out 4 years ago. But it's been around for decades, and there's a lot of early work that can guide our way. I tried back in 2008 to migrate VR technology out of the lab and use it for a clinical problem. I went to Sichuan, China after the 2008 earthquake to try and help with the post-traumatic stress problems they had with more than 50,000 school-aged children who'd been in buildings that collapsed because of the earthquake. We weren't able to scale. The technology was just too expensive, too uncomfortable to wear. We couldn't do it. However, last year, after the 2017 Mexico City earthquake, we were able to go in immediately with sort of a SWAT team of people using cell phone-based VR systems, provide counseling, relaxation therapy, help deal with the post-traumatic stress and immediate anxiety disorders that happened after the earthquake. So to me, that was very rewarding to see that we could respond that quickly to a crisis. So again, I think this is the time for VR. All the major consumer electronics companies are pumping billions of dollars into not just the head-mounted displays, but the movement sensing technology, the data analytics, the AI systems behind virtual characters. This is going to be the next way we work, the next way we play, the next way we do research and science. And it's just incredible, again, that we have this underlying basis of technology research that helps inform the way we can move forward. And again, when I talk about VR, I really mean all aspects of immersive technology. With AR technology, we overlay the world with extra information. With what we classically call VR, we block out the outside world. And then we don't always have to wear something. We now have room-based systems where we can step into, we can move, we can interact, we can be an embodied presence and work with other people in a room-based system without having to wear much. There's a lot of startups right now working in this area, thousands of them. and they're receiving venture financing. It's predicted now that within 3 years, VR will be adopted by 30 million users. Right now, I think the current numbers are about 15 million, but it's gaining speed fast. It reminds me, though, however, of the early days of the internet. Remember when we had 300 baud modems and it took forever for something to load? Even though we do have the technology now, and even though it is very powerful, it's not going to be as amazing as it will be in a few years. The technology is still a little bit uncomfortable, still a little bit, there's things we can't do. For example, social VR with multiple people in a virtual environment is not done very well. But we're gaining momentum, and as more people start using the technology, of course, it'll become faster and better. Just recently, there's been some major investments into medical VR startups. Reflection Health, I think, has raised about $20 million to do neurorehabilitation, home rehabilitation technology. Limbix here in Palo Alto is doing some amazing work with post-traumatic stress, and they're funded by Sequoia. And Mindbase has raised, I think, several hundred million now, I'm not sure, at a more than $1 billion valuation. They're the unicorn in this space. When I looked around to see what sectors of medicine are being impacted right now, I found that there's more than 72 emerging medical VR companies in 18 different clinical sectors, and I'll try and give examples of all of these. So again, why is it happening now after 30 years? Well, before the technology was uncomfortable, expensive, and bulky. And also, again, I think we needed to have it become very popular out in the consumer space before people were willing to use it in a clinical sense. But now people are using it in hospitals for pain distraction, mitigation, to help inform. David, who's going to talk next, is using VR to help prepare his patients and their families before a surgical procedure, or to train a surgeon on how to do a new procedure. It's becoming more than just a lab curiosity. It's becoming gradually part of the standard of care. So let me give you some examples. Again, the full stack of healthcare is being affected by the technology: health and wellness and preventative medicine, training, clinical assessments, and interventions. So there's a list here under medical training that's not exhaustive. Clinical skill training, of course. David will give some examples. Surgical skill training, interpersonal skill training, so team training and how a team can work together, how to use specific new equipment and tools, practice how to respond to a crisis as a group, and not just a group in the emergency room, but a whole city can practice how to respond to a dirty bomb going off downtown, for example, and get the police department to work with the clinicians to work with the mayor's office and practice and rehearse what can happen after an emergency. And here's an interesting area. We've been seeing great results using VR because you can see something from another person's perspective and embody them. And I'll give you some examples of this later. We can also teach empathy and sensitivity, cultural sensitivity, sensitivity to people from different social economic groups using VR. We've had for decades very expensive surgical training systems. Here's a picture of a knee arthroscopic simulator. But you would have to fly into regional centers and work on this very expensive equipment. It worked very effectively, and Carla, I think you gave some examples earlier of that. But it was expensive, and now it's distributed. We can do a lot of this at the regional hospital, at the clinic. Clinicians can download and practice a procedure using, here's a system by OSA VR that's used for training how to use a specific type of surgical equipment. We've also used, this is by Pravati Dev's company, VR for procedure training, for nurses skill training. This is an example of using it to teach a clinician or a nurse how to do a dialysis procedure. And here's just a quick example of some of the graphics potential. And again, you can immerse yourself in this. You can walk around and see what it's like, have your body react as you look at yourself with X-ray vision and see what's going on in your body. Well, that's a little too markety, but you get the point that we can make it fun and engaging for students to get involved in. And David, I know you're going to show us some cool stuff. it's not just learning, it's also preparing. We can take data fuse information from medical imaging systems and practice a surgical procedure in advance and have a team practice using that procedure. So pre-procedure planning and image-guided surgery are all enabled by VR technology. Now I'm going to switch from talking about training to assessments. We can do better assessments leveraging VR and AR technology too. Looking at medical images in a truly three-dimensional manner, better neuropsychological assessments, measuring very precisely activities of daily living. Physical medicine, OT-PT can be engendered by better measurements technology. I think the most profound effect, though, is in behavioral medicine, psychology, psychiatry. We can evoke an emotional response. We can study someone's behavior in a simulated environment, a standardized simulated environment, and do amazing assessments. Instead of asking someone what their cognitive state is, instead of observing them and writing down with paper and pencil what's going on, we can have them do a task, go through a quest, do a procedure, right on the desktop using AR technology, capture the data in a quantitative manner that can be used between subject comparisons. So we can do much more high-resolution assessments of behavior using a simulated environment. And again, I think that this will allow us with big data analytics to really understand what's going on. I think a lot of the noise that's been in the tests the pharmaceutical companies have been doing has been caused because a lot of their measurements of cognitive function are subjective. Using VR, AR technology, we can get reproducible results in a standardized manner that can be customized for an individual demographic group. Oh, I forgot to warn you about this one. I'll explain it in a second. This is a group of wearing a VR system. Their challenge is to reach out and rescue the kitten at the end of the plank. And it's an example of how emotionally evocative VR can be. So if I had remembered to give you the background on that, if you look out that window and look towards the quad, you'll see where the virtual human interaction lab is. And we do demonstrations there where we have people come through into our lab. And one of the standard demonstrations is we have people walk a plank. At our demonstration, we don't have a kitten at the end of the plank like this group does. But you go up in an elevator and you walk on the plank, and it's amazing. I'd say 30% of the people that we have come through the lab, even though we're talking to them, even though their friends are in the room, they can't walk across that plank comfortably. And it's just amazing if you haven't tried it. It evokes that cognitive response. So what's the point? If I can evoke a cognitive state, be it joy, fear, depression, anxiety, other cognitive states, I can teach people the skills to manage those cognitive states. And VR has been used very effectively to help with post-traumatic stress, with anxiety disorders, generalized anxiety disorders. Phobias is a good example, fear of heights, fear of flying. We can reproducibly evoke a cognitive state, and instead of asking someone to use their imagination to think of something that's really uncomfortable, really painful, we can do it with a virtual environment, and it's very persuasive. So let me just give you examples of how we're currently using virtual environments to treat some important problems. We're using it right now for stroke and neurorehabilitation, both acute rehabilitation and post-acute with home programs that we send home. Better assessments for physical and occupational therapy, speech language therapy, optical rehabilitation, strabismus, amblyopia. Chronic pain and acute pain is big right now. There's probably 15 startups out there and maybe 20 research labs that are looking at how we can use VR as a distraction from pain and as a way to teach people the skills they need to manage chronic pain. Weight management. And getting more into some of the clinical areas of behavioral medicine, we've had great results with helping with drug and alcohol abuse by teaching situational confidence and refusal skills in a simulated bar or crack house or other challenging environments. We've worked with patients with psychosis to teach them how to recognize their voices and how to respond to them. A lot of work in post-traumatic stress disorder, some that, Russ, I believe you helped fund some of that too. Generalized anxiety disorder, depression, mild cognitive impairment, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD. There's research showing the value of the technology to help in this area, and it's starting to escape from the research labs out as clinical products. Phobias, of course, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. I'm not going to read this list, but you get the general idea. If your favorite behavioral medicine problem isn't here, it's just because I didn't have room to put it on the slide. Moving from there, getting into the zone of preventive medicine, health, and wellness, we have some powerful tools that have been shown to be effective at changing people's behavior. And that's an important concept. It's hard to change behavior, and we've gotten great results using virtual environments. And I'll give some examples of how we managed to do that. But helping manage stress, addressing senior isolation, grief counseling, promoting exercise, helping with people who are trying to, after a traumatic brain injury, learn how to do executive functions and sequencing, situational awareness, weight management. We've had very good results in all those areas. I should also point out VR allows us to have a very portable telemedicine platform to reach outlying areas, underserved areas. A lot of what we can do can be done on a mobile platform. Now, some things you don't want to do on a mobile platform. I would argue that treating post-traumatic stress should be in a co-located manner, at least until we have better biosensors and a sense of presence of the clinician. But helping someone with fear of public speaking, for example, we have some great systems that people can download and practice at home. It's an example where you might have an audience that I might practice giving my talk to an audience that is not paying attention and not looking very happy, or I can start out with a friendly audience that's waving and smiling like you guys are, and reinforce my practice of learning how to present to an audience. We're also seeing an evolution of platform solutions that combine medical devices with pharmaceuticals and with digital health solutions and with VR. Jay Pierce here is from a company I'm advising called Equality, and we're developing an integrated platform that leverages all those technologies with a mobile health computing platform background. And it's not just VR and AR technology that's part of this. We're leveraging big data analytics and also a lot of the work that's going on in voice recognition and decision support and facial recognition. Here's a clip. I think this is actually about 6 years old, so it's moved on a lot forward by the work down at the Center for Russ, this is another project I think you funded, if I'm not mistaken, where we have simulated virtual humans. In this case, it's a virtual therapist who is interviewing a patient, and there's facial recognition of gaze direction, voice tone, posture, and that's informing the AI system's probing of the patient. Let's see if this works. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Can we click on that to run?
Hi, I'm Ellie. Thanks for coming in today. I was created to talk to people in a safe and secure environment. I'm not a therapist, but I'm here to learn about people and would love to learn about you. I'll ask a few questions to get us started. And please feel free to tell me anything. Your answers are totally confidential. Are you okay with this?
Yes.
So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
That's good. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm from LA myself. When was the last time you felt really happy?
When?
So
Hi,
that's,
I am a virtual copy of Nikhil, made using Orban's artificial intelligence technology. As Nikhil's personal AI, I enable Nikhil to spend more time with his wife and 3 kids, enjoy a nice hike, or go off-roading. Ni hao, wa shi ni ka, lai zhe shu
He
ni
doesn't
shi
speak
jie,
Chinese,
wa
but his
zhang da
avatar
shuai,
does.
nang chang ga, nang tia wu, hai hui shua jun wan.
So the point of this slide was to show that we're getting better at crossing the uncanny valley and making things look photorealistic, and have AI systems to help with the nonverbal communication, the facial expressions. But there's a demo of Nikhil singing and dancing in an AR system, even though he can't sing, he can't dance, and he definitely doesn't speak Chinese, but his avatar can. Now, we're working at the Stanford Children's Hospital to help with, you know, that stack of papers you get when you're discharged from the hospital and you never read them, but they're important? We're taking avatars of the clinician, and they don't have time to call up every patient to do a follow-up, but their avatar can be there, and the patient can click on the cell phone, an avatar of their clinician or their counselor pops up, can answer questions, give them guidance, and instead of that stack of paper, there's a dynamic system that they have a bond with. It represents the person they've already been working with. Let me give a few more examples. We've done a lot of work with post-traumatic stress, combat post-traumatic stress, and phobias using VR to create a exposure therapy paradigm. We've used VR as a better objective assessment system for attention deficit disorders. Instead of, again, observation or paper and pencil test, we have a virtual classroom that can be used to evaluate students' response to a classroom environment. We have developed addiction and situational confidence training systems where people can practice refusal skills, go into a virtual bar, and learn how to resist peer pressure. We've done systems where we do stress inoculation, preparing someone for a stressful process by having them rehearse in advance. And let me give this is one we've done at Stanford Children's Hospital I'm really proud of. This is Project Braveheart. Can we turn up the volume a little bit?
Braveheart is an interactive VR experience developed to reduce stress levels in children who will be undergoing a surgical procedure. Patients and their families are guided through a 360-degree video tour of the hospital by a virtual companion.
Who had had the procedure before.
The gender-specific tour guide provides a friendly, approachable, and relaxing tour of the facility and introductions to doctors and key hospital staff. Along the hospital tour, patients visit the key rooms they'll encounter on the day of their procedure to help make the unknown more familiar. Children learn about parts of the procedure and can even practice mindfulness and relaxation exercises. The intuitive software design allows the user to navigate through scenes and applications, learning the hospital layout, all within Braveheart at their own pace, creating a first-of-its-kind, interactive, and immersive video environment.
So we're about to, we did a double-blind
when Braveheart
study.
is finished, anonymous usage analytics are stored and available by scene, time, and engagement
cortisol
for analysis
and
by
other objective
doctors and
measurements of
researchers.
stress. And we're about to unblind the study and analyze the data. I'm pretty sure we're going to get some very positive results because we've seen kids who otherwise refused to go in for their surgery. After taking the virtual tour and meeting the clinicians and see what was going to happen, they said yes, they would do the procedure. I only have a few more minutes, so I'll go really fast. VR is used very effectively now in many of the major hospitals as a distraction from acute and painful procedures. It's used to help train and rehearse giving bad news about a terminal illness. There's a whole neuroscience behind why VR promotes behavior change, and I can go into that later if anybody wants to approach me, but basically we leverage some of the neuroplastic aspects of the brain and our reward systems. And we can take advantage of mirror neurons. One study we did here at Stanford was to age progress some Stanford undergraduates, which is a very scary thing for them, by the way. We gave them some real money, and we asked them whether they wanted to put it aside for retirement or spend it on whatever they wanted. Those who'd been exposed to their future self put aside money for retirement. But we use the same principle for healthcare. We can say if you don't take your medication, if you don't exercise, your future self starts frowning and looks very unhappy. And that's something that doesn't have to be on a VR system. It could be on your cell phone. So again, that's a powerful thing, is to close the feedback loop by exposing people to what they're going to be like if they don't follow what they're supposed to do. I started out by talking about my worries about the aging healthcare crisis. VR has been used to help with isolation and loneliness, acute and chronic pain, depression, many of the major problems that our seniors are experiencing. And I'm glad to see there's probably 6 startups that are focusing on that clinical area. Okay, that's my talk. Thank you very much. Do we have time for? Yeah. Yes, please.
One of the challenges in clinical trials is the placebo effect. I wonder if VR can be used to somehow understand how that's being driven by some of the messages and whether it can be harnessed in a way to get a better clinical trial design?
That's a very good question. The question was about how the placebo effect and whether VR can be useful to help us understand that. I think because we have control of the stimulus that we're showing a patient to a high degree, I think we can address some of that. I should say, though, I think some of the positive results we're seeing are probably because of a novelty factor, because VR is very evocative because it's so new for many people. So we also have to keep in mind that that may be going on. All right. One more question? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is any of the solutions being already accepted by the FDA or on the path?
One of the companies I work with, Paratherapeutics, just had its digital app approved by the FDA, 510K procedure, and it can be written as a prescription, but it's a digital app. Achille is, for addiction, Achille is working on an intervention to help with some aspects of learning disabilities, and they're in the pathway to get FDA approval. There's several companies that have gotten FDA approval for neurorehabilitation using VR. So yes, we are getting those interventions approved by the FDA.